Hey everybody, Mah-Dry-Bread here. I look like crap today, but it doesn't matter because I'm productive crap today. I earned this cheap beer. I don't know if you've been following me on Twitter today, but my computer almost died today. It kinda did, like half. It was like a zombie. I'm gonna explain what the problem was and how I fixed it, just so that any of you who run into the same issue perhaps will know how to fix it, because I managed to fix it for free. I still have a replacement part on the way because I do not trust that it will stay fixed for very long. So some background. My computer I built, and I've replaced parts in it over the course of 9 or 10 years, something like that now, of how long I've had this computer and just built on it and built on it and built on it. And over the course of that time, as you could probably imagine, just about every part in the computer has been replaced at some point. I think I have one fan in the computer that has never been replaced, has just never had any problems. The case itself has never been replaced because I've never really had a need to. And the power supply, weirdly enough, has never been replaced, considering everybody I know's power supply has not lasted 9 or 10 years. So earlier today, I think I was actually just playing a game, getting stuff done for the show, and my computer just abruptly turned off. And I was kind of taken aback because I hadn't seen that in a long time. My mind immediately goes to fucking power surge or like power outage, because, you know, the area doesn't have the best electrical. I look around and I realize, no, the other lights in the room are still turned on. And wait a minute, my computer can't turn off from a power outage. I have it hooked up to an external power supply specifically for this. And my side monitors are still turned on, just not getting a signal. The only thing that turned off was actually the computer tower. And then it started doing a thing where it started turning on for a second and then turning off again. So I go around to the back of the case, I turn off the power to the case so it stops doing that. And I think for a second, like, okay, well, how am I gonna fix this? And the first thing I think is, it didn't overheat, did it? Because in the past when I've had a computer overheat, it did a similar thing, you know, shuts off and then tries to turn right back on, and sometimes it would fail a couple times. And so, yeah, I left it off for about a minute, turned it back on, booted it up, and it booted okay. Well, I have a fun problem with my new motherboard where every time it abruptly turns off and turns on, it scrambles the order of my boot sequence, and so it almost always lands on something that's not a valid boot drive and yells at me about that. So I gotta restart it a couple times until my actual boot drive shows up, because sometimes it doesn't realize it's there. So then I click it and, yeah, it works. I load into Windows and everything. I'm like, okay, well, nothing's missing, nothing's damaged. Nothing's messed up on the Windows end or anything like that. The BIOS seems to be okay. So I set up my whole BIOS and everything. I made sure like everything was normal in it, and it didn't forget anything. And so I immediately decide, okay, if it was overheating, there's a really easy way to test that. So I open up ZCPU is named one of those two. It's a nice little freeware program that can stress test your CPU. And I also opened up Core Temp, which is a great program that monitors the temperature of each core of your CPU. So I open up those side by side. I go to the benchmark tool, and I tell it to just stress my CPU. So it maxes out every core of my CPU, makes it work as hard as it can. So I click that, and I look at the temperatures, and of course, as you'd imagine, the temperatures rise. And the temperatures hang around 80 Celsius. With the overclocking that I do, I don't have anything too hardcore. I don't have like liquid cooling or anything, and sure, my airflow thing isn't the best, but I'm also not overclocking it the most hardcore in the world. So I've got it running at about 80 Celsius, and it hangs there, and it doesn't really go any higher than that. I'm like, okay, well, that's, you know, for my tests in the past, 80's fine. Like, the shutoff point for my computer is 100 Celsius, and you really don't want it near that. I'm cool with 80, so I'm just looking at it for a minute, and I'm like, I'm not seeing anything weird, and then boom, it turns off again. And I'm like, okay, I was just looking at the temperature. It was not near the shut-off point. This isn't overheating. And it does the same thing. It tries to boot up a bunch of times. I turn it off. I give it a second, and I turn the case back on, turn the power on. Yells at me about my boot drive, tell it to go find the right one, boot up the computer. I'm like, okay. So the other thing that comes to mind is, it's my power supply, isn't it? Because every time something's wrong, I have that inkling in the back of my head it's gotta be the power supply this time, right? And it never ends up being the power supply. But I'm like, okay, but this time it's gotta be the power supply, right? That thing is old as dirt. So, I keep trying to test things. I do little stress tests here and there, and it always shuts off. So I'm thinking, okay, I will turn down my overclocking and just see if that does anything. And I turn it down a bit, and it still craps out during the stress test, and then turn down some more, and craps out during the stress test. Eventually, I just don't overclock the CPU at all. I just have it at the default speed, which is like 3.7, which normally I have it at like 4.7. And it still craps out like really early. I'm like, okay, that's strange. So once again, suspecting CPU more. I'm like, okay, how much do I actually need to stress this for it to shut down? Because like, this is maxing out CPU. So I go on my browser, I watch a Twitch stream for like 20 minutes, I participate in that a little bit, I type in the chat stuff, nothing wrong. I watch some YouTube videos, nothing wrong there. I open the launcher for the Burning Crusade World of Warcraft from 2008, which can work on like my wife's shitty old laptop. I've seen it work on people's netbooks before. That shut off my computer. And I'm like, okay, that's weird as hell. And this pretty much means I can't do any work. So immediately what I do is I go over to her laptop and I record a shitty little vlog on her laptop where I'm just like, here's the problem. Here's what I think it is. I'm going to order a new power supply. So I buy a new power supply. That's already starting to ship, which is good. Good God, I need a new power supply. And I said, basically, worst case scenario, it's not the power supply. I needed a new power supply anyway, and I'll take it into a shop and see if they can figure out the problem, and I'll learn from that. Best case scenario, I replace the power supply, and that fixes the problem, because for fuck's sake, I need a new power supply. I make that little vlog. There's no editing software on her laptop, so I couldn't find any free stuff that's even remotely good. So I just transfer it to this computer, and I was actually able to edit it on this computer without any issue. However, I couldn't render it. I'd always fail about a minute into the render. It would just shut off the computer. So Bob Wolf of the Wolf Den on YouTube, much bigger channel than my own. I'm sure you've probably heard of him if you like Nintendo Switch stuff. But once again, Bob being the fucking saint that he always is, I asked him, I was like, I'm so sorry to bug you. Can you render this for me? Like, it's just a project file, an audio file, and a video file. It's already edited. Can you just render it for me? It's like, yeah, no problem. Of course. So I just sent him stuff, and he rendered it, and he sent it back. And I guess that doesn't need to be aired now. Probably. I might have the problem fixed now. I'm not 100% sure. I stress tested it for like 30 minutes, and it didn't crash. So that's a very good sign. Although I do hear a little bit of coil whine through my headset that I didn't hear before when it's really stressing. So yeah, I'm replacing that fucking power supply because it's totally that. There's no way it's anything else. So he sent that back to me, which is fucking awesome. But by the time he was sending it to me, I think that I have fixed it. So what I did, in the meantime, so I sent the stuff off to him, and I'm like, okay, if this power supply is fucked, I'm gonna go all out on trying to fix this thing, see if I can at least learn something from the power supply. So what I did was, shut off the computer, unplug the computer, unscrew the power supply, take it out of my computer. I take a look at it, and I peek around in the grate thing on the top. I've air blasted this thing 1,000 times before, but so much of it gets crammed down in the nooks and crannies. If you've ever opened a power supply before, there's so many tight little corners that it just gets packed in there. It's awful to clean. You gotta get I use compressed air, and then I also use some Q-tips to kind of shovel some of it out because it gets compacted down in. So I opened it up, I took it out, and with the power supply itself, I took out the screws to take the fan grate off, and then took out the screws so I could actually like lift up the case and properly get inside the box that is the power supply. This voids the warranty. I'll warn you now, there was actually a sticker over the last screw. I couldn't find it for a little while. You break that sticker, you void the warranty, but it's like 9 years old. There's no way I still have a warranty on this thing. So I open it up, and as you can imagine, most of it was about as clean as it's gonna get for a power supply. However, like the top grate is pretty clean, the side grate is pretty clean, but the bottom of it, layer of dust, there's nooks and crannies with it packed in there. The biggest thing was I was able to actually take the fan out, look at both sides of it, really inspect it, because it wasn't spinning very well. I did notice in my testing that the fan would spin a tiny bit and then stop, and a tiny bit and stop, and like really struggle to go. And so I started like really cleaning it out, air blasting the shit out of it from both sides. I started trying to get into the little crevices of the fan itself. Were kind of gunked up a bit. Things over the course of 9 years got packed in there. And so, you air blast 1,000 times, but eventually you need to like really get in there. So I really got in there. I cleaned the thing out pretty hardcore. I cleaned out the rest of the power supply quite a bit, which probably didn't matter as much, but if it was overheating, because what I think now is I think the power supply was overheating. So I really cleaned that up too, just so there's less gunk in there, there's more airflow, there's less gunk heating the thing up. It's mostly just dust from years and years. So I really shoveled it. Like, my garbage looks disgusting right now with how many Q-tips covered in this shit there are. But I deep cleaned the fucker. It obviously doesn't look as good as day one. It still looks like it was set on fire at some point, but it's about as clean as a 9-year-old power supply is gonna look. I put the whole thing back together, just the screws back in. It actually wasn't that bad to take apart and put together. It's just a few screws. There's nothing that you could really break. It's all metal. The whole thing, there's not any part where you're gonna forget which way a thing went in. The only thing I took out was a fan, and it's right there in the top. So it was actually pretty painless. Once I figured out where the last screw was, which is under the sticker. I really should have figured that out sooner. Put the whole thing back in, screw the thing back in the case, close up the case, plug the thing back in, turn the power back onto the case, hit the power switch for the computer itself. On the tower, boot the thing up. It yells at me about the wrong boot drive. I don't even know why it did it that time, but I restart the computer, go into my boot settings, tell it to use the fucking solid state. Maybe you use the one that says boot drive on it. Gee, I wonder. So I boot that. Christ. Boot up the computer. I stress test. I leave it for like 10 minutes. No issue. And I kind of, I peek in the case, and it seems like the fan's spinning this time. The fan is spinning. I can hear it. It's a little bit louder. It's 9 years old. It's not spinning as fast as it should, but as I said on Twitter, the fan is basically a senior citizen at this point, so, it's spinning. I'm surprised I got the fucking thing spinning. So I got the goddamn thing spinning. I re-overclocked the computer to what it was before, stress test again for another 20 minutes or so. At the full speed, it's getting back up to like 80, 82 Celsius again. I look in there, the fan's still spinning, it's good. Everything seems to be okay. I got a little bit of cleaning in on the rest of the computer while I was in there, but the rest of the computer was mostly clean. It had only been like a month since I cleaned it, although the room's getting a bit dusty. Now that the heating kicked on in the building because it's getting hot, built up dust from the vents blows out, so that doesn't help. But man, did I earn this super cheap beer, which is surprisingly good. Stonewall Light, not sponsored, by the way. Coolbeer.com, hit me up. Toronto Cool Brewery. I'll get a sponsorship with you. $1 beer. So I think I fixed it. Now, there's a chance that this will fail to render. In which case, you'll never see any of this. However, I think I fixed it. But at the end of the day, I think it's safe to say that power supply is on its last legs, so I'm pretty happy I ordered another one now. I was originally saying in my vlog, like, man, I'm probably not gonna be able to stream CK2 this Sunday. I'm streaming CK2 this Sunday. And again, unless it dies before then, it might. Knock on wood, I got it fixed. So, that was harrowing. I didn't want to break my 9-year video a day minimum streak over a CPU fan being old and garbage. So I am going to take today as my cheat day from my diet to deal with the unreasonable stress I just went through. I have lost much weight, which I'm very happy with. I'm down to 14% body fat. So that means I've lost 3% from my goal a few months ago. I'm only 2% away from my goal of 12% body fat, which is fucking awesome. So I'm pretty happy about that. And good God, am I just gonna relax for the rest of this day. Thank you everybody so much for watching, and until next time, have a nice day.